Let's move on to today's newspapers. Erin Ogunke is with us here on set. Erin, you're starting, aren't you, with that Kentucky grand jury's decision on the killing of Breonna Taylor?
That's right, Stuart. Violent protests have already started in the city of Louisville, Kentucky, and that's because just one out of the three officers involved in her killing has been indicted, and this not only for her death, but for, quote, wanton endangerment in the first degree. In this case, the jury considered that the people who were in danger was not Breonna Taylor, who ended up dying, but her neighbors, because the officer who was indicted hit the 10 shots that he fired. You can see his picture there. None of them hit Breonna Taylor. They actually penetrated her apartment wall and moved to the neighboring apartment, endangering the lives of her neighbors. So a pregnant woman, her husband, and her 5-year-old child, even though none of them were hit. Now, this opinion piece by the Washington Post looks at the Black Republican Attorney General's reaction to that grand jury decision, and more specifically at the language that he used in his analysis. So the author of the piece says that this Attorney General there repeatedly referred to Breonna Taylor as Miss Taylor, which the author views not only as a kind of banal formality, but also as a sort of kind of protection for the fact that, in the author's opinion, justice was not done. The article points out that the officers did not announce themselves when they arrived at her door, that her boyfriend was armed, but that he had a right to carry. She ended up dead. This, even though neither of them were the object of the police pursuit, in the face of what the author views then as a grave injustice. He says the Attorney General respectfully called her Miss, which is supposed to make up for the fact that nothing is going to be done and that her life is undervalued by prosecutors in Kentucky. Now, the Attorney General concluded his speech by saying that criminal law is not meant to respond to every sorrow and grief, to which the author says maybe, but it's at least meant to surely be just.
Erin, I'm sure many viewers are wondering, watching all this, the coverage that we showed at the top of the news as well, why it's just so hard to charge police officers in cases.
That's, I think, what's on a lot of people's mind in the U.S. right now. I think this piece by the Wall Street Journal, better explains that. The piece notes that this is just kind of the latest in a long pattern and series of police officers not being held to account for the use of deadly force. Now, the article points out that just 8 officers have been charged for murder or manslaughter each year since 2005, even though there are around 1,000 victims of police use of deadly force annually. The paper argues that the discrepancy is a result of high legal standards set by the Supreme Court for charging officers, among them a case in the late 1980s which decided that police have leeway to make life or death decisions based on their subjective perspective or their subjective view of danger. So as long as a police officer can reasonably believe that their life or the life of others is in danger, they can use force, and that's obviously hard to prove otherwise.
That's Erin on the top story that we brought you in our news bulletin. We're going to go down to what was our last story in the news bulletin now for the next item. A musical icon has passed away here in France.
That's right, Stuart. Juliette Greco on the cover of today's Libération with the headline, as always, with Libération, a kind of a play on words. It says there's no after, and that means that's both the title of one of her songs and referring to the fact that there's no future for this type of music now that Juliette Greco is no longer among us. So she's a real icon here in France, not only for her music, but also for her kind of fearless, if not revolutionary personality. And the article cites one anecdote to that extent that I really like, which was that her mother and sister were arrested for being a part of the French resistance in 1943. And Juliette Greco, when she was just 16 years old, in order so that her sister would not be going to jail for minors alone, she slapped a police officer and was actually imprisoned for a month because of that. Now, the Huffington Post also focuses its piece on a part of her life that I think many international viewers are not necessarily aware of, which is that she had short but kind of passionate relationship with the jazz icon Miles Davis, who she met in Paris. Now, Davis apparently was really taken with being an American, was taken with what he viewed as her freedom, and most importantly, the fact that he was Black was visibly not important to her. But racism did ultimately, unfortunately, complicate their relationship, because when Davis had to leave Paris, he was going back to the United States and knew that interracial relationships were unaccepted, and in many states, interracial marriage was actually banned. So they didn't make it, but they stayed in touch until Davis's death in 1991, and Juliette described their union as a diamond, pure and burning with passion.
Yeah, always fascinating to find out more about the lives of some of these people that we know the names of. Let's finish up with this story. A French town is banking on an unexpected material to clean up the oceans.
That's right, Stuart. Human hair. Now, this is at the
nice.
initiative of a group of citizens from southern France who came up with this innovative scheme.
Yeah.
Since hair is lipophilic, which means that it absorbs fats and hydrocarbons, the idea is to use hair to soak up oils in the ocean when there are oil spills.
Right.
So to do so, they have collected a whopping 40 tons of human hair, thanks to hairdressers not only in France but in countries elsewhere in the European Union. And the idea is to stuff the hair in nylon tubes, which are about the size of a human forearm, to stuff these tubes into the ocean and for that to absorb the oil. Now, the tubes can actually absorb 8 times their weight in oil and will be sold to interested parties for $10.50 a piece. So if you ever decide to grow out your hair again.
I was going to say, I'm not sure I'll be able to contribute that much, I have to say, but I could do my best. I think you might be a bit more of a contender for that one, Erin. Erin and Gunke there with the papers on France 24. We'll bring